This government footage of El Salvador's so-called mega prison went viral when it was released in February.
A frightening image inside a prison in El Salvador, and President Nayib Bukele wants the world to see.
Cartels are terrorizing the beautiful Central American country of El Salvador, but the government is fighting back, using their own brutal torture techniques to keep those cartel members scared and in line. El Salvador has long struggled with violent gangs such as MS-13 and Barrio 18, which have their claws dug deep into the country and its history. Many of these gangs originated in the United States among Salvadoran immigrant communities and expanded to El Salvador due to mass deportations in the 1990s. Over time, these groups have evolved into powerful criminal organizations involved all kinds of illegal ventures, including extortion, trafficking, and violence. By the 2010s, El Salvador was consistently ranked among the most violent countries in the world, with homicide rates reaching as high as 103 per 100,000 people in 2015. This crisis demanded urgent action from the government, which launched various strategies to combat cartels and gangs, ranging from hardline approaches to temporary truces.
For 10 days, the country's national police has been operating with less restrictions. They say they've arrested over 6,000 suspected gang members.
Cartels and gangs related to cartels have been a consistent problem for El Salvador. These cartel members bring nothing but pain, misery, and even death to the country's inhabitants, with their criminal activities costing the government millions each year to try to tackle it and clean up after them. But realizing that dealing with the aftermath of the cartel handiwork was not the best option, the government decided to take a more proactive approach to dealing with these criminals and cleaning up El Salvador once and for all. Under President Nayib Bukele, El Salvador has taken an aggressive stance against gangs. Bukele's administration has implemented measures such as mass arrests, extended detention, and militarized operations. This iron fist strategy has drawn both praise and criticism. Bukele's government launched an extensive crackdown on suspected gang members, leading to the detention of tens of thousands. In 2022 alone, during the country's state of emergency, over 70,000 individuals were arrested for alleged ties to gangs.
It's believed to be the largest prison in the Americas with a capacity for 40,000 people, and it's the latest step in a controversial crackdown on crime that's caused the country's prison population to soar.
The El Salvador government sent these cartel members to new massive prisons and often shared images of the prisoners being stripped of their individuality, packed into cells, and subjected to strict regimentation. They did this for a reason. They wanted to reinforce the message that there is no tolerance for gang-related activity. While the Salvadoran government officially denies using torture, several reports and testimonies from former detainees and human rights organizations paint a grim picture.
Suddenly, you're hit with the intense gaze of dozens locking onto you. These men described as the worst of the worst, tattooed with reminders of El Salvador's dark past.
Testimonies from several former prisoners tell the tale of intense physical abuse that begins almost immediately. From the moment of arrest, law enforcement officers reportedly beat suspected gang members during raids using batons, fists, or even rifle butts. It's an incredibly heavy-handed tactic that the authorities use. In custody, prisoners often face further beatings for even the most minor of issues, or as a means of exerting dominance.
Inside the cells, the beds are metal plates, and there are 2 toilets open to the room.
Prisoners are also forced into painful and unnatural positions, known as stress positions, for extended periods of time. For example, some detainees are made to kneel on sharp objects or hold heavy objects above their heads. These positions cause severe pain and long-term physical damage. They are also deprived of basic needs, with reports of prisoners frequently being denied food, water, or even medical care. Starvation or dehydration is used as a tool to break the resolve of these cartel members. But it's not just physical abuse that is the problem. There are also threats and mental torment too. Guards and interrogators often threaten the cartel members with death, harm to their families, or indefinite detention. This psychological pressure creates a climate of constant fear and insecurity, often breaking even the toughest and most hardened of criminals. One of the most terrible and harrowing forms of psychological torture involves staging fake executions. Cartel members are blindfolded and made to believe they will be killed, only to have the act interrupted at the last moment. It leaves them on edge and unable to handle the pressures of the prisons anymore.
Other detailed interrogation techniques include mock executions, where a suspect is made to believe that their death is imminent or that a detainee in a neighboring cell has been killed.
In some facilities, detainees report being subjected to loud noises, bright lights, or disorienting sounds for long periods. These practices of noise and sensory overload aim to disorient and mentally exhaust inmates. It's just another way of messing with the heads of the cartel members without physically abusing them. The government allows this because they want the stories of to get back to the cartels and their members. Images and videos released by the government show prisoners in dehumanizing conditions. For example, detainees are stripped down to their underwear, shaved bald, and made to sit tightly packed in rows or cells.
It looks like a sea of skin and tattoos. These images, released by El Salvador's government, shows the transfer of about 2,000 inmates, stripped to their shorts and with their heads shaved, to what's been dubbed the country's new mega prison. It just opened.
These public displays serve to demoralize both the prisoners and their wider networks. It may make cartel members think twice before engaging in any criminal activities. It may seem brutal and unnecessarily dangerous, but it works. For those who have been detained, though, it's not a fun existence at all. Some prisoners are reportedly coerced into confessing to crimes or implicating others under duress. These confessions are sometimes extracted through intimidation or physical harm. While it's not the most moral way of doing things, it's certainly effective. Cartel members, especially those considered high-ranking, are frequently placed in isolation for extended periods. Solitary confinement is known to cause severe psychological damage, including depression, anxiety, and hallucinations. The complete lack of social interaction and sensory stimulation is a deliberate tactic to break the spirit of even the most hardened of criminals. On the other end of the scale, El Salvador's prisons house thousands of prisoners in confined spaces. Cells designed for a few inmates are packed with dozens, forcing detainees to sleep on the floor or in shifts.
This government footage of El Salvador's so-called mega prison went viral when it was released in February.
The options are complete isolation, away from everyone and everything, or packed together with other cartel members like sardines. Neither is a great option. Poor hygiene and limited access to clean water lead to outbreaks of diseases like scabies, tuberculosis, and gastrointestinal infections. These conditions are exacerbated by the lack of medical care. Family visits are often prohibited, leaving inmates completely cut off from their loved ones. Again, this isolation further contributes to the psychological toll of imprisonment on the cartel members.
Relatives of those detained have been desperately trying to find out what's happened to them.
Of course, there are those who often speak out about the conditions in the prisons. Yes, they are used to deal with cartel members and other criminals, but the methods that they use are often considered to be terrible. Torture violates international treaties such as the United Nations Convention Against Torture, to which El Salvador is a party. The use of these tortuous methods undermines the rule of law and due process, meaning that others will lose faith in the justice system. It's a double-edged sword.
A frightening image inside a prison in El Salvador, and President Nayib Bukele wants the world to see.
While torture and harsh conditions may deter some individuals from joining cartels and other gangs, they risk creating martyrs or symbols of resistance. Some may be inspired by those who are being tortured and join a cartel in order to avenge their treatment in prison. These practices may also alienate communities, making it harder for law enforcement to gather intelligence and build trust with civilians. And, on a grander scale, reports of torture damage El Salvador's standing in the global community. Torturing your prisoners, cartel members or not, is not a good look, and it is leading to criticism from human rights organizations and potential sanctions from international bodies. But using torture methods instead of rehabilitating the criminals could set a troubling precedent for other nations facing similar challenges. It's a dangerous game to play. The alleged torture practices in El Salvador's anti-cartel efforts highlight the many problems and issues of a country faced with growing cartels and extreme violence. While the government's hardline tactics have managed to reduce crime in the short term, the use of torture raises serious concerns about human rights and long-term societal impact, even if those on the receiving end are cartel members.
Conditions at Secot could become inhumane and degrading because no one has access to that prison. No lawyers, no ombudsman, Not even the media can enter and verify the conditions inside.
A real solution will require a balance between enforcing the law and dealing with the root causes of why people join cartels and get into gang violence, such as poverty, inequality, and lack of opportunity. Sure, it's keeping cartel members scared, but it is walking a fine line between maintaining order and going too far. So now it's over to you. What do you think of these torture techniques against cartel members? Are they justified, and should they be used, or are you against such treatment of prisoners? Be sure to let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments section. If you haven't already, please give this video a like and a subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching.